Yesterday my recording didn't work for class, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about covenant. Covenant is an idea that in the ancient Near East culture was extremely important, and to understand the character of the God of the Bible, of Yahweh, you have to understand what they would mean by this commitment called a covenant. It's a lot deeper than America's idea of contract. The contract that we would typically make is pretty shallow and at the very foundation of a promise that we would make ourselves in America. We typically value the number one is us. If we're not getting what we want, we bail. And but covenant wasn't like that. So covenant could be between two people. It could also be between two nations, or it could be between a God and a person, or a nation and a God. The different aspects that were involved in the covenant, there would be rules and consequences if you broke them. It wasn't some kind of blank check to do whatever you wanted. There were promises involved in making a covenant that brought you great benefits. Okay, so there's these huge consequences and then these huge benefits that kind of balance each other out. You would only even make a covenant, a covenant would be so severe if you broke it, there must be such great motivation involved to even risk that. There would be a symbol of a covenant, like in modern day marriage would be similar, and we would have a wedding ring, but they had their own symbols. A whole heart of a person would be required for a covenant, and it would demand all of who somebody was, not just outward or some just shallow, commitment. Let's see. And it would also be a lifelong commitment. To the grave, you would keep it. It wouldn't be feeling based on jumping in and out of it. It would be based on your commitment. And that would imply that it would be very difficult to keep at times. And at the very bottom foundation of the covenant is you care about the other person more than yourself, even if it's at great risk to yourself. But that doesn't mean there wouldn't be benefits for you in a covenant. It just means you would be more committed to that person's well-being than even your own. Now, in the Old Testament, when people make a covenant, the phrase, somebody cut us a deal, cut us a good deal, they would use to cut a covenant. And in that Middle Eastern, ancient Near East culture, they would actually line up split animal pieces down like an aisle for both parties about to make the covenant, and the two parties would walk through the bloodied pieces and even get blood on their robes as they walked through, and then they would declare the terms of the covenant in the middle. And legally they had the right, if that other party ever broke the terms, that they could split the other party violently as a consequence of breaking that covenant. So, to cutting the phrase cutting the covenant, it's like you could cut the person. So key people in the Old Testament that had covenants with God, you had Adam, Noah, Abraham, with the promises that God made, and the one-sided covenant that God makes where he walks through the pieces himself, but Abraham is put to sleep. And then you had another extremely major one with Moses with the Ten Commandments. The people agree to the covenant. They're sprinkled with blood. They put themselves under those terms and conditions of if they break the law that God can demand their life. And then later with David, which becomes key for this material. Today, examples of covenant that America would sort of grasp versus contract, even though we would all kind of use the same words for commitment. Military, firefighters, policemen, doctors, all these people can put themselves at great risk for the people that they serve. They take oaths to do good to their audiences and the people that they're caring for. And once you are that for life. Even if you retire, you can still be active in that role with your knowledge and such. Marriage is supposed to be this way, but in our society, we're sort of changed it to contract, where you jump in and out based on your happiness. The main way in the Old Testament that the people we're going to study broke their covenant is with the Ten Commandments, rule number 1 and 2, which is no gods, or that you shall have no other gods before me, and you shall not make any idols. They broke the covenant over and over with idolatry, and God considered this to be spiritual cheating. It wasn't just a, like if you didn't pay your cell phone bill contract and you get a little fine. He considered it to be spiritual adultery and brought all that emotion along to that with his people. There's nobody like our God. He loves us with that immense sacrificial love that at the bottom of who he has pointed his kind heart towards us and will show up every day to be faithful and to do good towards us. And he desires us to live in covenant, in that same deep covenant love pointed back towards him. This is really the essence of salvation in the New Testament, is entering into the new covenant with Jesus. A relational thing is how we get to God. A covenant with God really is salvation. We're brought back into relationship with him after being lost. And so I just ask people, have you walked the aisle? Have you, not just literally in a church, walked the aisle at a church camp or something, but in a deep marital kind of way? Have you said yes to Jesus to be his part of his bride, where he is husbanding you, taking care of you, protecting you, not even to just your grave, but even beyond?